Hey everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft Legion beta video. Today I'm going to be showing you an add-on that shows and indeed unlocks the full potential of Legion's new action camera settings. Now, in a previous video I had mentioned a new feature called the action camera. Basically, it gives you a camera that is more akin to what you would see in something like Mass Effect or Dragon Age or any action RPG, and it puts that into World of Warcraft. Now, one of the things I said in that video is that I was really keen in seeing how modders would use that camera, how, the various different innovative ways that people will be able to use that new functionality in the game, because at the time of that video, we were only able to control it via a small number of console commands. Well, the CVARs and stuff have been found by add-on developers, and now we can actually have a look at that through an add-on called Dynamic Cam. This is very much in its beta phase, and what it does is it first of all lets you pretty much fool around with all of the various options that are available for the action cam, and then it has its situations feature. This will allow it to dynamically change your camera behavior based on what you're doing. Right now, it's if you're in the city, if you're indoors in the city, if you're mounted in the city, if you're in the world, etc. Loads of different things. So right now, if I were to mount up, you can see it puts me into the mounted mode. If I dismount, it puts me into my world dismounted mode. You could see some of my UI disappeared there. This actually also covers the functionality of having UI elements appear and disappear, albeit in a rather rudimentary fashion, so hopefully that's something that they will improve over time. But as an example, you could have it so that you're using a minimal UI with only your mini-map when you're running around the world, but when you go into combat, suddenly your action bar will appear. That's one example of usage. Now, first of all, let's just have a look at the actual functionality that is going to be available to players and to add-on developers. So, first of all, we just go to Dynamic Cam, and this button here, Raw CVARs, allows you just to reset all the data that this accesses. So first of all, we have our shoulder offset. You can see it's offset to the right of me. I can move to the left, I can move to the right. We can change this however we prefer. I know some people prefer their character to be on the right-hand side in a third-person game. I personally do prefer the default of the character being on the left-hand side with the shoulder offset, but that's something you're able to change. This also lets you do max camera distance, which of course is something that we've been able to do for a while. You also notice when I zoom out, right, it zooms out at a certain pitch. Well, I can change dynamic pitch, so I can make it zoom in straight in and out, or I can make it dynamic. When you're zooming in straight, sort of in and out like this, it almost, to me, feels like you're playing a third-person game with the camera from a first-person shooter. So that's why I actually do like dynamic pitch. Now, there are a few things here right now. As you can see via those tooltips, the add-on dev is still working on how they are, but basically, you can change some FOV-related things with how it does pitching. So if this is set to 1, it's down a bit lower, but you can set this to increase or decrease the kind of amount of swayiness of the pitch. I'm just failing at words, but you can see, if it's at 1, we kind of go like this. If it's at 0, it's kind of nothing. But if it's at 0.24, it's like that. If it's at 0.83, it's like that. That's something you can tweak around with. I'm just going to put it. I think it was at like 0.7, whatever. It can go there. There's a pad for when you're flying. There's the smart pivot cutoff distance. We'll dig into those bits of functionality, as the beta progresses, and that will let people fine-tune the camera behavior to be a little bit nicer. We've got the head track movement, so this is whether the camera should follow the player's head. That's something I showed off in the previous video. And then you have the actual strength at which you do that. As you can see, camera's following my head. Looks pretty cool. Overall, let's head back into the settings. We also have a smooth rate, so that's just how smooth that movement will be. We've got the actual strength of it, so let's just put that down to say 1. Movement range, a lot of features and a lot of things that people will be able to access when making add-ons. I foresee an add-on package that involves a revamp of the UI, a revamp of the camera, and a whole bunch of situational things, such that you get pretty damn close to this being like a third-person game. Now let's look at situations. Right now, I'm running around, stuff's normal. Let's pop on my Origin Hippogriff. This will put my camera out a lot for my player. One thing that you don't really want to do with this action cam is be constantly tweaking your camera position all of the time. because that's just a lot of using the scroll wheel. What this add-on does is it basically sets that for you, such you don't really have to think about it. In the same way that maybe in, say, God of War, the camera automatically adjusts itself, but, you know, obviously it's not a perfect example. Okay, so let's do an example with combat. Right now I've got it so that I'm a little bit more zoomed out when I'm running around the world. I think that's pretty good for situational awareness, but what if you're in the situation where you want to benefit from that more immersive combat? Well, let's just hop over to this Elec over here and I'll show you. So we hop into our Hippogriff, which puts us into the mounted camera mode, which is a little bit more drawn back. We then pop out of that, it goes into the regular one, and then we charge into combat, and you'll see it gives me a more close-up experience that, to some players, will be a little bit more cinematic. Now, this mod, by default, does not work in the likes of PvP combats, dungeons, etc. It is solely designed for doing world content. So, just so expectations are in line there. Overall, I just think it does a pretty nifty job. Right now, it's very early. It's maybe not something you would use as it is, but as these features are built out and as some of the bugs that I've experienced are chipped away at, it could be a really good asset to the game, and certainly if you're using this and an add-on like Storyline, if you're the kind of player who prefers that sort of thing and really wants an immersive game, like a role-playing game over the sort of combat elements of things, then this might be a really cool way of doing things. So let's just have a look at the different settings here. Let's look at World. So we've got some camera actions here. We've got the transition time. We can make that really long. If you wanted, you can make it nice and quick, which is personally how I like it. You've got different zoom settings. So zoom to fit, zoom in to, zoom out to, zoom range, and set zoom to. They're all just different behaviors of zoom. We, for an example with range, there's a min and a max. They're right now both just set to 9, so it's pretty much acting the same as set zoom to, but whatever. Over to the shoulder settings, we can change the strength of our shoulder settings, we can change the head tracking, strength, the target lock, dynamic pitch, a whole bunch of other things. We can also hide user interface elements based on what we are doing, and there's the actual conditional for, that's the conditional string there for working out whether we are in the world. So there's the world indoors, there's in combat, maybe you might want to be a little bit more zoomed in combat. You can pretty much tweak this to be whatever you want. Of course, like many add-ons, it supports profiles. What does that mean? Well, if somebody has worked out the perfect, game camera solution that's super cinematic, well, that's great. You can just import that and off you go. Now, there are some other pretty nice things about this mod, and to show you one of them, I actually need to head over to Skyhold. Actually, there is one situation in this system that I really wanted to show you that I completely forgot, so let's just do that. When I interact with an NPC like this, you actually see it's got this nice little zoom in that tracks them somewhat with the camera. I think that does make it a bit more personal, right, in terms of the interaction with the NPC. It's the kind of thing, if you were designing this as a story-based narrative game from the outset, maybe similar to a Dragon Age or something like that, instead of having the camera be pulled back when you talk to an NPC, it doesn't make sense. You'd have it zoom into them or, some sort of little thing like that. Now, what I would really love to see is an interaction with an NPC like this, and instead of this quest thingy over here, perhaps some dialogue options and stuff like that would appear to the right of the player character. It's the sort of thing you would ideally, you wouldn't really want it to be a screen space overlay, but if you could somehow have that in world space, it would be really cool. I'm 99% sure add-ons can't really do that, but still, another thing which could lead to a more immersive gaming experience, which I think is pretty cool, and it adds a layer of production value on top of World of Warcraft that I don't really think it previously had. Let's head to Skyhold so I can show you one other pretty cool feature. So here's Addon. Addon is a really tall guy. Now, as many of you know, in World of Warcraft, when you go to talk to an NPC that's really tall, it's a pain in the ass, because I'm not talking to Addon, I'm talking to his bloody shoe. Let's right-click and see what happens. Look at that. It zooms to fit my target. Now that is something that I think is really quite a cool bit of functionality. And if you think about whenever you fight a large boss, it could be super useful. Now, normally whenever you fight a large boss, right, you are kind of looking down from here. And this is, I've just got it set up right now so that I'm pretty much going straight in with my camera and it doesn't have that dynamic pivot. With a element of dynamic pivot, you can see it frames it so that you can see your character and the thing that you're fighting in a way that doesn't feel as much as like a sort of a top-down view because of that pivot. I think that really helps frame the world. It does make your character feel absolutely tiny in comparison to what you are going to be fighting, but I think it gives you actually a more clear view of both. maybe that's a bit of functionality that people could use well. And perhaps with the dynamic camera and some of the ways that it behaves in terms of, not in terms of occlusion, in terms of collision, there might be a kind of raiding mode that utilizes some of the features of the action camera, not to give you a zoomed-in, brooding cinematic thing like this, but give you a camera that actually helps to increase visibility and awareness in a raiding situation. Maybe that will be possible, maybe not, but I think an add-on like this, appearing so soon after the dynamic, or the action camera itself, was found by players, I think it definitely does speak to there being a lot of potential within this system. I've been doing some world quests on this character with this add-on, and yeah, I do feel like it's a more immersive and interesting experience. It gives you all the pros of having this, nice sort of cinematic view without the cons of, having to zoom in and out by yourself all the time in order to get a game that feels playable, because realistically, when you're running around the world like this, it's not ideal. So this really does help you out quite a bit, and I love sort of inventive and creative uses of add-ons here, which aren't necessarily saying, hey, we need this bit of functionality or UI to improve a level of throughput. No, this is a bunch of add-on people saying, hey, we think we can actually make World of Warcraft a better game in a number of ways through this system, so let's engage in a game design task rather than a task which is, let's help players increase the throughput. Both of them are, of course, cool, noble pursuits. I definitely have quite the appreciation for little add-on efforts like this, and of course the likes of, say, TRP, not that I'm a role player, or storyline. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comments or via Twitter, which is by far the best place to get a hold of me. And with that, I will see you next time.